Welcome, all of you, to another episode of Mormonism Live. RFM, how's your week been?
Really, really busy, but fun.
Good, good. Tonight, folks, we've got a forensic criminologist on. And she, without any prompting from us, took some of the conversations that were happening out in the Mormon space. She started off with the Robert Gurr debate with me and submitted to me a forensic report. And I thought it was interesting enough that I handed her a couple of other things to do the same kind of work with, and we'll take a look at that today. So let's start by bringing her on. This is Dawn McCarty. Dawn, how are you doing?
I am good. How are you?
Excellent, excellent. Let me put the slideshow up so that folks can see the thumbnail there with the beautiful face of Jacob Hansen and Robert Gurr, as well as some fictional Mormon lawyer, because we'll be talking about the Mormon Stories lawsuit tonight as well. But I thought it would be fun to, get started with you telling us what your occupation is, what your expertise is in this field. Let's start there, and then I think we're going to have a great conversation tonight.
Sure. So I am a criminologist. I am also a cybersecurity strategist working in the security EGRC, which is governance area for like cyber defense for United Health Group. So it's a pretty big healthcare organization that I do. That's what I do by day. At night is when I do all this other fun stuff with the forensic reports and whatnot. So I have been dabbling with this forensic engine that I use. It's a behavioral engine for working on my own personal projects. And there was just something that clicked in my mind when I was watching the episode with Robert Gurr that made me think, wow, there's so much here. So I'll get more into that as we go, because I don't want to ruin it yet until we can really get started and run off with that.
What is a forensic criminologist? What is one who has that title? What do they do?
Well, in criminology, we're basically really looking for patterns and behaviors rather than historical events or trying to translate what the law is, or even presenting a case like RFM may as an attorney. A criminologist is going to evaluate what is going on, what were the behaviors, what's the authority that's in control at that particular time. At least that's my lens that I'm using it in when I do these reports. So I use these a lot I started off with doing predator profiling. So I look at bad actors, and I call predator for me is a pretty big umbrella, but I also really focus in on the child predators as well, so I can help families see and spot those red flags so that they can protect their kids, and they learn what to look for in their children when their children are at home sitting at the table or on the couch watching a TV show. You will learn to see some of those red flags that should be an indicator that there's some compromise going on there, or that the child is in distress. So that's how I started using these behavioral reports. And then I flipped the lens one day on my own life and realized, well, I had my own groomer. I had my own child predator sitting at my own dinner table when I was in high school. And so I started flipping it in there and just really kind of dissecting what were those behaviors, because I had a front row seat. So I started pushing into that a little bit more and creating the chat GPT is where I started. Then I created a custom GPT, and I work in AI a lot at work as well. So I have a lot of experience in there, and that just kind of evolved. And when I sent you the first report, I was using a custom GPT, but then I have since migrated over into a enclosed, it's an LLM, which is a language model, wiki. So now it's contained within its own structure, and anything that I put in it is source fed, target fed, and evidence sourced. So just kind of give a little bit of background on where I started and how I got to where I am now.
Yeah, you mentioned red flags. I do want to ask, do you notice any red flags in the life of Joseph Smith?
Oh my gosh. Oh yes.
Maybe
Definitely.
We can go into that on another show. And go into detail about all of those red flags. But
There's definitely red flags.
yeah, I'm curious. So you've explained to us what a forensic criminologist is, a little bit about what you do. You mean predator sort of in the big tent sense, anybody who is, as you said, a bad actor who's taking advantage of other people, but that you have worked specifically in the like child predator arena or space as well. But I'm curious, like, what is this methodology? So for instance, I'll put up on the stage the front page of one of the reports. And by the way, each of these reports is in the show notes. Folks can go and read those. Sorry, I've got a dog upstairs barking. But would you explain to us like what this methodology is? What is it looking for? What are you going after that the rest of us out here in the world maybe wouldn't know to do or do as well?
Yeah, and so one of the things I'd like to start off with is I use a lot of cybersecurity terms because to me it's a crossover. It's a way of explaining an anomaly or something that's happening that doesn't make people's eyes cross when you're talking in clinical terms or too legalese where it's really hard to understand. A lot of people are starting to understand more and more the cybersecurity terms. When I say social engineer and that's a bad actor, that's somebody that's trying to convince you, coerce you, manipulate you. They're like a grifter type of person. So that's kind of the basis of where I started with this. And it's looking for specific patterns. So when I talk about an apologetic or a critic or even a victim or survivor, there's certain roles that is created within the framework that the engine's looking for. So when I feed the information, I have to give it a source, I have to tell it who is the target, and then I have to tell it the role that it's playing. So then it knows exactly what it's going to go through. And then the source could be a YouTube video like I did with the Robert Gurr in the debate that you had with him. So and that's all I did is I tell it what it is, where it's coming from, who I'm looking at, and then the role that they're playing. So it went through and it kind of dissected that debate to give me where the behaviors are and what they are and when is it happening, how is it occurring.
Love it. All right, so then let me put this back up. And maybe some of what you just said would fit here as well, but I want to give you a chance to say anything extra. So I hear you saying that you're essentially plugging in data, behaviors of somebody. So in this case, it's multiple conversations. One of the conversations is the debate between Robert Gurr and myself. Another one is Jacob Hansen with Alex O'Connor, which I'm really interested to see what you have to say about that. There's Jacob Hansen with myself. And then there's also, as a completely separate away from that, the Mormon Stories lawsuit you took a look at as well. And so you're plugging in the data of that conversation and you're looking for patterns of where one party or the other is behaving like a bad actor and is manipulating the conversation in some way.
Yeah, and they could be to various degrees. They may not intend to be doing, to be doing that, but it's to the extent that when you're in a debate, there's a certain role that person's playing, right? So that's what the engine would be looking for. And so when we're looking here, your question on here is the difference between what someone looking at history, so going back and looking at Mormon history or doctrine, that's something that a historian would be excellent at. You guys are excellent at this. I watch you all the time. I learn so much from you because I'm not that historian. I don't know a lot about the back doctrine. So a historian knows when it happened, how it happened, or who was involved, who was there, who wasn't there. They know the timelines. They know all of that information. Where me looking at this from a different perspective as a criminologist, I'm looking at, well, how many females were living in Joseph Smith's house? What were their ages? What was the premise of that? How did this even happen? How did Fanny Alger end up living with Joseph Smith? So I'm looking at those things and then looking at that outcome of what happened. So it's a little bit different. It gives you a different perspective, and perspective for me is always going to be beneficial. When you're talking about this kind of stuff, we hear the same things. We're talking about Fanny Alger on both sides. But when you bring in this perspective, it kind of sheds a new light into it. And I
Does
wish it
that
would
kind
shine some light on me, because I feel like my lights are still getting darker and darker. Sorry.
I think you look fine. Bill, we had
Thanks.
a little bit of an issue before the show started, and there's a little bit more light now than there was before, and apparently we've exhausted the wattage.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a pretty bright light. I'll move it and see if
You
that
just hold
helps.
it right there in your face. That looks good.
I
Perfect.
got like
Thank
down
you.
here like this.
It does
Uh,
sound, if I'm understanding you, that it's sort of like you're going beyond or attempting with this to go beyond the normal who, what, when, where, how of history to the why underneath.
yeah, and I think that's an important part where we got to get to the nuts and bolts, and you guys do a really great job of digging up a lot of this historical information and explaining it to where, it helps me understand. But I want to understand more. I want to understand the behaviors. I want to understand how this stuff was even allowed to happen. Like, I've heard in some of these videos that, oh, well, it was the way of the time. And I also heard this growing up as a kid. Like, it
Mhm.
was the way it was supposed to be because of XYZ. Well, that's not a good answer at all.
No, I think the real answer is that there were dumb shits then, just the same way as there are dumb shits today.
Sure.
And I know
Yep.
because I was one of them for 40 years.
And by the way, I'll just say there was an abnormally large number of female girls in the Joseph Smith home unrelated to him, just for the record. So as you point out, that's a pattern your
It's a pattern.
program would notice, is that beyond the scope of what normal life looks like, Joseph Smith is having way too many children in his home.
And I haven't even gotten to him yet, but I
Yeah,
will.
save that for a future episode. Let's do that. I had this for the end if we had time, but I think it's really important to say it here. This process of putting data in and having the program look for patterns, this isn't a bias thing. Like, you could do this with me, you could do this with RFM, you could do this with a critic on our side just as well as you could do it with an apologist on the other. Because
Yeah.
I think that there will be people from the believing side who will their way to get out of this whole conversation is going to be like she's pinpointing things because she's looking for things from the believing side to sort of attack. What would you want to say about the objectivity or the unbiased approach of
Yeah.
work that you do?
Well, and I'll start, and if I can have some permission to go into a little personal part of my story, where I was abducted as a child, and then later, a few years later, I was adopted by my mother's new husband, and that was so that I could be baptized into the Mormon Church. And then later, I was sealed to him, but I was taken away from my real father. So now that I'm going through all of this indoctrination or deconstruction of the indoctrination, I needed a way to make sure that my bias, my own narrative, is not coming out too much, because I'm writing a memoir, and I want that to be something that's worth reading, right? It's not just
Mhm.
do another trauma dump in a memoir. I want it to be meaningful when someone reads it, and I want them to see the crime or the narrative as it plays out, to where they can keep turning that page. So also, I am now, because I have found evidence, I am now in the process of petitioning to reverse my adoption. And that is just part of what I need to do. But I need that to be no emotion involved in that, right? I have to make
Mhm.
sure that when I present this to the judge, that he's going to see, okay, this was fraud. And that's all I need him to see, right? He doesn't need to see the whole backstory. He doesn't need to know the details of when I was taken or how I was taken or who it was. He doesn't need to know all that. So when I started looking at trying to create a custom GPT that would know only my story, so it wouldn't go out on the internet. It wouldn't drift with the information that, because I'm sure you guys have seen how much AI can drift really easily if you don't contain it. So I needed to make sure it was contained. So that's where it began. And it just started evolving from there. And as I started siphoning through the evidence that I inherited from my mom who passed away last year, I inherited 3 storage units of all kinds of stuff. And alls I could do was really grab as much information, documents, artifacts, that kind of stuff, and go through that piece by piece. And that's how I found the evidence of a fraudulent adoption. Um, and when you're presenting that, it needs to be, you have to be really good with evidence and the how did I get this evidence? Where did it come from? Can I back it up? I can't just say I was abducted. The
Right.
judge wants to know more. Well, how do you know, or how were you abducted? What time was it? What date was it? All that information I didn't quite have yet.
Mm.
So as I started filtering through the evidence, I started realizing that I need help organizing it. So and that was another piece, is organizing the data that I need to get out of it. It's really impossible for a human to do in a short period of time. I mean, it might take me years if I did it myself, but using the AI to do it helped me progress and evolve this system. And now I just keep evolving it into more and more, and flipping that lens is when everything kind of just took off and started becoming more meaningful in other ways. And I sent that to Bill, like, check this out. I was pretty like shocked at the results and how streamlined it seemed. And I just needed another set of eyes on it, really. So I wanted to get his opinion since it was about him. So, oops, now we're dropping
I will
light.
say that having reviewed the slides prior to the show, um, I don't see anything that I really cavil with. It seems pretty straightforward and on the mark as far as its take on
It's
the Gurr
clean.
and Hansen. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And in
clean.
fact, there was something in there, and I'll let you know when we get to it, that really helped me out because it put words to something that I've experienced and a lot of people have experienced, but I never really had the words to understand it before. And there's something about giving words to something that makes it more
Yeah,
real and
words have
manageable
meaning.
for me.
Yeah. The words
Excellent.
have meaning, and I think that when we have those clips, when we get to those, I can kind of tell you what I see, what I think the engine discovered and what it meant to me.
Gotcha. And then I also want to say, anywhere along the way, if you have any criticism because of the way that your work shows up about me or Alex O'Connor or anybody on the other side of the conversation, I think that that would be helpful to the audience to see how the program can pick apart either
Hmm.
side. But I do want to at least give you a second to sort of set the table by explaining some of the terms that you use in these reports. And again, to the audience, these reports are available down in the show notes of the YouTube description. You can access all 4 of them. By the way, I used your prior report. I reached out to you today and said you were noting essentially interlocutor A, which was, I think, Jacob Hansen, and I was interlocutor B, I assumed, but I wasn't really the focus of
Yeah,
the report. So I went ahead and just used the original report because it made sense to me once you
yeah,
sent your explanation why you designed it the way you did. So I'm just letting you know that
yeah.
the original report is what's in the show notes.
Yeah, and that's probably good to let people know, because this is an evolving technology, right?
Yeah.
It's always going to be something that it's going to evolve as technology evolves. So as I critique it, as I get critiques, as you and I talk about these results, and we could say like, wow, this would be really good. Can it detect this? And that's something that I can throw into the user interface, which is Codex is what I'm using. And it can help structure how that fits into the data without me saying, I want you to tell me if they're lying. We don't want to say anything like that. We want to keep it very straightforward and simplistic. So when I put in the source, which is a YouTube video, the target, which in this case is this one for Robert. It's really small on the screen. Whichever one it was, I put in the target, and then there's a role that it's looking for. And these were the ones that I did originally, and I have now migrated to the new system. So they're slightly different. But when it's talking about source A and source B, it recognized without me even telling it that there were two subjects and it didn't even mention the host. So Stephen, I think, was the host. It didn't even bring him up. It
He
knew
was
that there
barely
was
there anyway.
yeah. Well, okay. I won't say anything there. But it knew that it was looking at Jacob Hansen or Robert Gurr because it's put them in subject A. And then it also recognized that Bill was there, but he was there for context. And then what I did is to show Bill, I put Bill in subject A. So I set him up as the target. And then it did a report on him. I don't know if you had time to look at that because I know that was today, but just to show that I can put myself in that target, and it'll critique me and how I did in my role, whatever role I'm telling it. Like let's say I was a critic on a certain topic. It'll critique me based on that. So I don't have to feed it any more information.
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to read. I glanced at it and I saw where it now named me as essentially interlocutor B or whatever. But when I saw your email explaining to me why the original report didn't have it, that made total sense. So I just went right back to the original report and made sure that was the one we posted. But I would love if you want to say in a concise way what it thought about my side somewhere along the way, feel free to chime in and say that. But I'm wondering if these are some of the terms that you used in these reports, and I think it would be helpful to the audience to kind of know what these things mean as we proceed through the rest of this conversation.
Yeah, let me get my notes up here so I don't go screwing things up. So, a lot of things, it comes up with new terminology every now and then, so I have to make sure I'm capturing that as well. So I noticed when I ran your report, it did use new terms that I haven't used before. I haven't even told it about those terms. So it's something I'm going to be learning as well to make sure. So when remember I said that I use a lot of cybersecurity terms, and I do that for a reason because it's a way for me to explain it without trying to fit it into another narrative in the explanation. So it gives it a different spin, and then I'm hoping that people can understand where I'm going with it so I can draw connections to it. So narrative patching, for example, in cybersecurity, we're patching systems, and those systems are being patched because they may have vulnerabilities, they may not have vulnerabilities, but we want to prevent them from having any kind of corruption or being exposed to any kind of weaknesses that could allow any kind of compromise. So narrative patching is relevant or relative to that, because in behavioral analysis, that is when we have a new explanation that are being added after a claim is damaged. So the original belief can stay intact, and now the problem is not solved, but it's covered by another story. So narrative patching is when you have this vulnerability now that's in play.
So like the catalyst theory. So when RFM and I use this cliche that I think we use a lot now, making Mormonism indiscernible from a fraud, it's that the church or its apologists make an original claim. Data in the world, science, history, whatever it is, now shows that that's a vulnerability, that it looks like there's cracks in the explanation. And so the church or its apologists come along and apply a new narrative patch in order to allow the believer to continue believing at least in part, the original claim.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's taking a new spin. And it was perfectly fine before that. Now all of a sudden there's a vulnerability. So now it has to put a new spin on it.
Okay. Semantic inversion.
So in cybersecurity, this is like a trusted label that can be misused. So a file can look safe, a link can be look legitimate. We all look at phishing emails. We all are concerned about clicking on links, kind of thing in that terminology. So it could also mean that a system message may appear official. So you're getting something that looks like it's from Amazon or looks. So that's what this is talking about. So in behavioral analysis, the semantic inversion is when a word keeps its authority while its meaning is reversed and it's softened to avoid the evidence. So for example, translation becomes revelation.
Or
Remember that one?
inspiration, right? It can just be inspiration. It can be a
Yeah.
broad Bible commentary, for instance.
Yeah. And that happened after the translation evidence failed. So now all of a sudden we have to put this new spin on it.
Love it. Cognitive.
Does that make
containment.
sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good.
As soon as you explain it, I go, oh, in Mormonism, that's where
That
it is.
clicked. I think it clicks. All right. So cognitive containment in cybersecurity, containment means limiting where the threat can move so it cannot spread through a system. So if we know that there's a known piece of malware or something on our network, we're going to want to contain that and isolate it, right? So that's what we would do there. In behavior analysis, cognitive containment works almost in the reverse. So it keeps the listener inside the preferred frame, so other explanations feel unsafe, immoral, irrational, or impossible. That has Jacob Hansen all over it.
Yeah, and don't listen to any of these podcasts out there with people telling you the other side of the story. That's why my new name is Radio Free Malware.
I love it. Epistemological fog.
Now this one's interesting. This was one of the first ones that popped up, and I love it. So in cybersecurity, too much noise can make it hard to tell which alerts matter. Like we can be overloaded with. I don't know if you know what log files are, or when you're constantly being alerted to there's a vulnerability, you have to fix this, it's critical, it's high, it's medium. All these notifications are coming in from every direction. So where the intrusion started or what was actually being compromised is what we really need to know, right? So in behavior analysis, the epistemological fog means making the evidence field so blurry that no conclusion feels reachable.
Okay.
Apologists do that, don't they?
Huh?
I'm just saying apologists do that all the time, don't they, Bill? No conclusion is reachable. We're not arguing that it happened. We're just arguing for plausibility.
Yeah, the Hill Cumorah can be anywhere other than New York.
Can move. I think it's in a jar of dirt.
The Meldrumites think it's in New York still.
They do.
Oh my
Just they
gosh.
took all the armor, and then I guess the wolves came and ate all the Nephites.
Of course, they'd be wrong too. All right, false dilemma framing.
All right, so in cybersecurity, attackers often pressure users into forced choice. So click now or lose access, right? We see this in emails. We see this in all kinds of places where they're applying a level of fear. So anytime there's a level of fear, you need to stay away from that. Stay away from that link. That's what we teach people. Don't click on it, especially if there's a threat involved. You need to stay away from that link. So in behavior analysis, we have a false dilemma framing that reduces the complex issue to two extreme options, where the preferred option feels safe and the alternative feels dangerous or incoherent.
Can you come up with an example in Mormonism of that one? I'm trying to think of like a way to relate to the audience.
Nihilism versus
everybody who leaves will end up depressed and sad and lonely. Yeah.
Right. Determinism. Yep. All of that.
Love it. All right. What's our next one? False dilemma framing. We already did that one, correct?
We did that one. We did framings next.
Yes. Systemic overexertion.
Wait, are we? Oh, no, did I miss a few? Oh, no. I see.
Is it false dilemma framing? Or I thought maybe you said we did that one already.
We did false dilemma, but then I guess I have more than what you have.
Oh, I love it. What do you have?
Framing is on my list next. So in cybersecurity, the frame determines what the analyst is looking at the system boundary, the threat model, the asset, the risk surface. In behavior analysis, framing sets the boundaries on the conversation so certain facts feel central, certain facts feel irrelevant, and some questions feel out of bounds. So in the debate, there's constant framing going on. And if there's an interruption, because even Bill, you even do framing. I think that in the debates, the point is framing. And there's times where there's crossover where someone interrupts your framing and changes it. And this is one of the critiques that I think that came up for you is that happened to you. And at first you would think Bill should have said something, the moderator should have said something, but it actually worked in everybody's favor because you let it kind of expose itself. So that was brilliant.
The Robert Gurr debate with the child marriage. Yeah.
I'm watching it going, Bill, shut him up. Finish your sentence. I wanted to hear what you had to say.
When someone's incriminating themselves or the thing they're defending, just let them keep talking. That's the secret.
And you did. Yeah, that was fun. All right, my next one is trust credential spoofing. So in cybersecurity, spoofing is when something imitates a trusted source. It could be a URL. It could be where there's an L instead or a 1 instead of an L. It just looks very similar. So it could be a small address, a login page, a caller ID, some kind of security prompt that would bypass normal caution because you wouldn't see it or it wouldn't catch your attention. But in behavioral analysis, that trust credential spoofing is using a trusted role or a title, a spiritual identity, a platform, or an insider status to bypass ordinary scrutiny, which I think we all know what example we could use there. So having credentials is not spoofing. The issue is using the credential as credibility armor.
Gotcha. There's a fallacy when you pretend that somebody is absolutely right simply because they're the expert in the field rather than the actual merit of their argument.
I've heard it called the appeal to authority.
Yeah.
Or a bishop.
Yeah.
Isn't it crazy that the entire Mormon church is based upon a logical fallacy? They're all authorities. They're general authorities. They're local authorities. It's all an appeal to authority.
It's in a hierarchy too, all the way down. And then even in the youth groups, you have a hierarchy there as well.
The Mormon church is designed to keep people from finding the truth.
Yeah. That's the game that's being played. Do you have any more on your list? Otherwise, I
have the systemic overextension was the last. My last one? Yeah, that's the last one. All right. So this one, in cybersecurity, the system under stress can become overextended. Too many exceptions, temporary fixes, dependencies, or workarounds create new vulnerabilities. And in behavioral analysis, systemic overextension means the defense has to work too hard to keep the claim standing. Every contradiction needs a workaround, and the workaround becomes part of the evidence.
Love it. Okay, so now I just wanted to note to the audience, sort of, because we're not going to be able to dig into all these reports. We're sort of just hitting some highlights, showing some video clips to show how you and the program you use work. But these were things that I noticed as I was going through the reports. Institutions often defend themselves without anyone coordinating it. Again, it's not that the church hired Jacob Hansen. I guess that's possible, but it's not that the church hired Jacob Hansen or that Jacob Hansen is working out things with the church. It's that in the apologetic realm, there are lots of voices, in a sense, disconnected from each other. But once one of them senses how to work with that problem, they all tend to gravitate to the same kinds of solutions. And so it looks like there's this unified front, but really it's how apologists as a whole deal with a problematic issue in order to prevent it from being too problematic for the believer. The next one I've got here is the strongest defense is often not evidence, it's reframing. And I think we see this all the time. Anytime we get into a conversation with Jackson Washburn on the, would you let a 14-year-old be in your home? Jacob Hansen, the moment I started to talk to him about Does Joseph Smith know the Adamic language? The moment you catch them, the apologist figures out a way to get away from that part of the conversation as fast as possible and reframe the conversation in a way that's advantageous to them, or at the very least gets them away from the problem.
There's a clip coming up here with Bill and Jacob Hansen, where Bill does exactly that to Jacob Hansen. And you could see him trying to get away because he doesn't want to answer the question because he knows it. And Bill does not let it go. Bill does an expert job of holding his feet to the fire when he finally has to answer the damning question with the damning answer and then blow it off with, but so what?
Yeah. And one thing while you're on that, I want to tap onto that really fast, because when I could sit here and watch these videos all day long, and half the time I'm just listening to them, there was something about that video that made me stop and watch it. And what I think is interesting is, you know your church facts. You're really good at all of that kind of information. And what you were able to do for me is expose the scaffolding. And that's the piece that I needed to be able to set these behavior patterns into play. So a lot of it was just by what you already know. You did all the work. I actually just audited the shovel.
Yeah, love it. The next one here: high demand systems train people to become comfortable with contradictions. It's messy. There's lots of complexity. I used to say that all the time. I still do, but I used to say that all the time when I was in the faithful point of view and trying to help people through their faith crises.
I remember that's where you were when I started listening to Mormon discussions.
Yeah.
May God light your shoulders, or whatever stuff you said at the end of every episode. What was that?
May the Lord warm your shoulders.
That's it.
Yeah. The real
that sounded a little Gileadish.
Yeah, well, Handmaid's Tale, I was sort of in a cult at one time, Dawn. So the real battle is usually about authority, not facts. And you see Mormonism always point back to authority.
And don't question it, right?
It's wrong to criticize leaders, even if the criticism is true. And then as you talk about overexertion or overextension, overexertion reveals weaknesses. The more, when you can see somebody is trying really hard to get away from the question, like Jackson Washburn, by the way, overexertion reveals the weakness in the argument. So those were things I noticed.
He had to take a long rest after all that overexertion too, didn't he?
He had to take like 3 months off, didn't he?
Yeah.
But he's back at it again. He's got his energy back, and he's out there. Although I think I've been blocked on Facebook from him, so he doesn't want to find himself in that conversation again. If somebody watches apologetics every day, what are the tells that you're looking for? Again, I get it's a pattern, but there's thousands of patterns in a conversation. Word, all kinds of things. What are the tells that you are noting a pattern is real and needs to be noticed and understood?
I think the first one on the Robert Gurr video was I could hear him repeating something and then rephrasing it, but he's essentially saying the same thing. And so it didn't change. You would ask another question. What he was answering, it wasn't changing his answer. It was just restating it another way. And that just caught my attention really fast. There's so many things that you can hear. Sometimes it's in the word use, the word choice. Why did they choose that word? A lot of times that's their tell. They'll choose a word that they think filled the spot or filled the need. But when I'm looking or hearing it, I'm thinking that word was not the appropriate word. So therefore, that entire sentence now is in question. Do they even believe what they just said? And if I'm questioning whether or not they believe what they just said, then they probably don't even know what they're delivering as far as a message. Then you have micro expressions. Now, Robert Gurr, he has a great baseline, and he held that baseline for you each had 3 sessions, right? So for all 3 of his sessions, he held that baseline. And for the first 2 of your sessions, he held that baseline. He didn't smile, he didn't smirk. In fact, he was a kind of like avoidant or disengaged because his eyes were all over the place. He was looking at this screen, and you're saying over here on the right, and he's looking over here to the left. So I'm picking up what he's doing while you're talking. And if you're in a debate, you would think he would be engaged with what you are saying, so he can then, I mean, if he's taking notes and typing, I don't know what he was doing. He could have been watching porn for all I know. I cannot say what he was doing. I just know that seemed kind of hard for him to follow what you were saying, because his eyes were up and down and everywhere. He wasn't like looking at the other screen, possibly typing. I know we all look in different areas, and when it comes to body language and facial expressions, don't let anybody tell you that just looking up means you're lying, because that's a bunch of boohooey. That's not true. We always look up because we're trying to imagine. So I'm looking up now, I'm looking for the next word I want to use. Does not mean that we're lying. Now, if there's
the right
a
or up
pattern,
to the left on?
No.
Up to the right
No.
or up to the left?
No.
Haven't you heard that one direction means lying, the other one means truth?
And what it really means is we write and read English, right? We start from the left, we move to the right. The left side is your past, the right side is the future, because you're writing into it, right? So when you're looking up and to the left, you're probably thinking back. When you're looking up and to the right, you might be lying, but you also might be trying to foretell, or maybe there's some foreshadowing, or there's something that you're trying to imagine in a
Plan
future
something
sense.
for tomorrow?
Maybe you're planning something. So it does not automatically mean you're lying. What's important is setting the baseline. So back to Robert, he had that baseline. He was very, very, like, he wasn't altering off that baseline until Bill started saying certain things. And then his body started betraying him, his face, his nose. He started doing these little tells, because what Bill was saying, and all of a sudden you see a shoulder shirk, and this is when you're protecting your neck, when you do a shrug like that. He was, now all of a sudden I'm starting to see him become uncomfortable.
What was Bill saying?
Oh gosh, I have to go into my notes because I don't remember exactly off the top of my head.
At least to me. Do you remember Bill?
I think
I
remember what you're talking about. I remember him being like Mr. Mannequin for most of it, and then all of a sudden he started getting the heebie-jeebies with Bill. And I don't know what it was that caused that, though.
I know, and I have it in here. Let's see if I can.
He said a lot more that
here we
made
go.
me uncomfortable than what I said made him uncomfortable.
Talking about predatory behavior. Oh, you know what it was? It was Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh. When you started talking about Gilgamesh, because you stopped and you reframed him. He went on and he said whatever he was saying, and you said, I'm going to pause right here for a second, which was perfect. And you restated that, and he did not like that. And he was shaking his head, yes, at first.
Yes,
very
he was, because what Bill was
aggressively.
saying was that the story of the flood and Noah and the ark preceded the Hebrews having it in the Babylonian Epic of Gilgamesh, right?
Yeah.
And that's when he started losing it.
Yeah. Yeah, because then all of a sudden you see him go, he shrugs his shoulder, and then he starts shaking his head no. And then after that, I could see the compromise where he's now, your nose itches, your face kind of has, you have so many nerve endings in your face. Now, people touch their face all the time, right? But when I know he's already shown me his baseline.
Yes.
I know his baseline is not touching his face. It's not even smiling. He barely moves. Even, when he's talking, he has more expression. But he sat there with a very straight tone the whole way through those first three, and Bill's too. And then all of a sudden now he's doing this a lot more. So it depends on the baseline. So you were asking me what I would look for. These are things that I look for.
Love it. Love it. Okay. I want to spend the majority of our time on the video, so I'm going to go through this really quickly, but this was things that I picked out from your report, each of these reports, and I'll just start with the Jacob Hansen, then we'll show the videos. But this was the Jacob Hansen, Alex O'Connor conversation. And I'll just note things. The debate quietly shifts from is it true to is it useful, right? Every person in a religion that's being combated with the falseness of that religion tries to find some ground where the other person will agree that Mormonism is good and useful in these places, so let's get away from truth claims. And it says, you can pause the screen, by the way, if folks want to read the whole thing. I'll just note Dawn's observation is that once the conversation moves from truth claims to usefulness claims, Mormonism gains a strategic advantage. And so you'll notice people like Jacob Hansen and other apologists who quickly want to make those kinds of shifts. The fruits are good becomes a substitute for evidence, right? So in Mormonism, if somebody's beating us up about the Book of Abraham translation, we want to start talking about the fruits of the gospel. And so your point in this part of the report was that good outcomes are being used as evidence for truth claims, and that one of the central mechanisms by which institutions survive empirical criticism. And there's been so many times in Mormonism where I raised a serious question with another believer when I was in the church, and that person would go like, man, look around, Bill. We've grown so fast. We do so much good. Mormons are known all across the planet as being the best of people. That's how I know the church is true, Bill. I'm not really worried about these other things. And so hence you can see why apologetic discussions sometimes feel persuasive, even when the original criticism hasn't actually been resolved. You noted that the Book of Abraham, for instance, becomes your model case for the semantic inversion. You argue that when Egyptology undermines a literal translation model, the definition of translation itself changes. We talked about that earlier.
It being Revelation,
right? It being the writings of Abraham written by his own hand, and now it's a catalyst theory or some missing scroll, which they won't even acknowledge.
That's the move. That's their move.
They won't even acknowledge that it requires 3 missing scrolls. I've been saying it for months now, and no apologist wants to address that. And I'll just note, one of your insights here was that the meaning of the key word changes in order to preserve the conclusion, as you point out, these kind of narrative shifts. Institutions teach people to reinterpret contradiction as depth, right? It's complexity, it's messiness. RFM, I'm sorry, do you have something?
Just go ahead, please. I just wanted to let you know, this is the one I was talking about before.
Oh, I love it. Let me just read the bold, and then please tell us what you were thinking here. So one of the things you noted in the report is that believers are gradually conditioned to interpret unresolved tensions as signs of spiritual sophistication. So instead of "this doesn't make sense," the response becomes something like, "this is deeper than I currently understand." I think right away of like a believer who says, "I didn't know that." And they say, "Well, you didn't read enough. You didn't think enough about these things."
So we rely on trust.
Yeah. Mechanisms that transform contradiction into validation. The fact it's messy doesn't mean it's not true. The fact that there are contradictions doesn't mean it's not true. It just means you have to know which sources to trust and where to look for information. And, they're fallible leaders, so they're going to make mistakes. And we sort of muddy the waters here. RFM, what was your insight here that you saw in this one?
Well, this is the deep doctrine, right? It's that crazy stuff that contradicts what they teach today. That's the definition of deep doctrine, I think, in Mormonism, if you break it down. But that's not how I experienced it when I was studying it and learning about it and loving it. So nobody told me this, okay? Nobody said these words, that contradiction actually is a good thing. They kind of hint at it in the First Vision accounts, but never in this way, that doctrines contradicting each other is a good thing. They try and avoid them. But without being told, and in a way, obviously, I think, to preserve my conclusion that the LDS Church is true, I managed to do that anyway to myself.
Yeah. When you say all of that, it reminds me of things like, okay, say Adam God, and Brigham Young teaches it and the church today disavows it. But in some circles, when you push hard enough, the response you'll get back is maybe Adam God is true. That's the meat, but the saints aren't ready for that. So what the brethren give the saints is the milk before the meat, and try to simplify the understanding of God so as to not lose people in the weeds. That seems like one way in which this sort of plays out.
Yes, when I was having my own dalliance with the Adam God theory, except it was my special version. I think I talked about that once down in Utah. It's been a few years ago. Anyway, regardless of that, I convinced myself that not only was I correct, but that because I was correct, all of the top leadership of the church, or at least most of them, the smart ones anyway, believed the same thing that I did, only they couldn't say it publicly because it was too deep. And only members like me, frankly, could handle the truth.
Right. Right. So you can start to see how apologists work. And then this was one where I see you criticize the other side, which is that Alex O'Connor's friendliness is part of the story. You talk about in the report that Alex's calm, respectful style actually creates ideal conditions for institutional reframing. Your point was
If there's no pushback, yeah.
Right. If you let somebody take the conversation wherever they want and to give them easy exit points whenever something difficult comes up, then you've made it easy for the believing person listening to the conversation to go along with the Jacob Hansen ride, never really questioning whether things are logical and add up at all.
And that can happen, and it could be so innocent. It could be just that you didn't really understand that particular topic, or you didn't understand the question, and you're still thinking. Like, there's times where our comprehension slows down the conversation on our side, but it didn't slow it down on their side.
Yeah, It's apologetic reframing. That's exactly what Jacob did at the very outset with Allie Beth Stuckey when she says, "What's this restoration about?" And he says, "Well, what it's about is restoring the ecclesiastical structure of the church. That's it." It was a complete reframing in order to make that target so small that he was hoping that Allie couldn't hit it with an arrow from across the room.
I did do one on that one, by the way.
Oh, that would be great. RFM, I think that's such a good point, right? Like, he is using language that anybody who spent a lot of time in Mormonism goes, why did he choose those words? That's not the way any Mormon talks about this topic. And that, as Dawn points out, is a sign to let's look at what's going on there when that different word usage happens. And it becomes clear that Jacob is using that intentionally to massage the conversation into the directions that he wants to.
Right, which is not to talk about Mormonism.
Yeah. So I'm just noting here, you make this comment about curiosity lowers defenses, and curiosity on Alex's part certainly lowers his defenses, but it also lowers the defenses of the audience because
and that's the point.
Yep.
The audience is being conditioned by the reframing, and by and Alex didn't do anything intentionally. It's just the way it turned out. It's just what was picked up as a behavior that actually enhanced or maybe has given leverage to the apologetic side, no matter who it is.
Yeah.
So, but the audience is only hearing the pieces, so they're walking away with thinking that what Jacob said or what an apologist said is the safest answer.
Yeah.
Well, right. And they think that's an accurate representation of Mormonism when any Mormon knows that it's not. David Alexander got totally.
But Alex doesn't. Yeah. Or some of the people that he's talking to don't understand that.
Right. And David Alexander's been a Mormon for only 3 years, and he knew that that Jacob was lying about what Mormonism teaches, and he called him out for it, and rightly so.
On the pivots on that one.
I just want
to get me started.
Here before I flip to the next slide. I think this is important for the audience to understand. I get tons of pushback. RFM, I think generally in a face-to-face conversation, you're a little more gentle with the other interlocutor, and people will, on that side that I'm having the debate with or the conversation with, I will be called rude or snarky or aggressive. But I think when I was reading this part of this showing up in the various reports, specifically with the Alex Connor thing, hostility maybe is a needed ingredient in order to display to the entire audience the absurdity of the other side's argument. Does that make sense? That on some level you need it.
I think I understand what you're saying. There is the ability to stick the knife in with a smile, and it takes some work.
Bill, and from what I've watched so far, and I haven't I watch a lot of your videos, but I don't always have this switch on. Sometimes I'm just watching, listening. When I'm intentionally watching, I see you very consistent, and you keep bringing it back to the facts, the
Mhm.
the not the what's the word I'm looking for. You keep it more facts based. And when either one of them, if it was Robert, if it was Jacob, if they go off on their reframing, you kept bringing it right back into let's stick with the facts.
Yeah, and I'm only saying, yes, my emotions get the best of me, but
But I never saw you rude. I haven't seen you rude.
there
This
is
is
a part inside my head though that knows that if I can in a larger way go, gotcha, then the whole audience goes, oh, he got him. And to me, that often makes
That's
the point.
strategy.
RFM and I both did that numerous times with Jackson Washburn. And anybody who watches that conversation goes, it took the hostility on the part of us two
Yeah,
to
yeah.
push him into a corner and force him not to have any exits out.
I
So
don't
I
know if it's
wouldn't say
hostility,
that's
but
your baseline.
it
I'm
was
sorry, go
definitely
ahead,
not
Arthur.
letting him. I'm sorry, I was saying I didn't see it as hostility. I just saw it as being firm. And
Firm,
Bill,
yeah.
this insight that I'm getting now from you about yourself, that you think this about yourself, that you're snarky, your emotions get away from you.
No, I think the apologist used that as the reasoning for why engaging me with the questions is not something they should do. It's if you were to ask the people on the other side who go, I'm not talking to Bill Reel, they don't go, he asked all the right questions and I don't have good answers.
Oh, right.
Their response is he's rude, he's aggressive, he's hostile, he doesn't really act in good faith, he doesn't really want to have a good conversation.
Thank you for clarifying that, because I was wondering, how can you think that about yourself when you're the closest thing to Mr. Spock I've ever met in my life?
Well, there's that. But I'm just saying to the audience, on at least some level, there's an intention in that because it displays for everybody watching, like, oh, he's trapped and he doesn't know how to get out. And Bill's just holding his feet to the fire on the thing. So anyway, that sort of shows up, I think, in the Robert Gurr conversation, for instance. But Alex is gentle, and that's the whole point. He's trying to have a good faith conversation. But what happens when the other side is a bad actor? Then it's sort of Alex is being played just for his medium that he's using, his podcast venue or channel to sort of let Jacob Hansen take advantage of it. Okay.
I'd have to rewatch that and see how Alex is acting. Is he giving Jacob rope, or is he just not going with or understanding the complexity of the conversation?
Yeah, I think unlike Allie, Alex did have some conversations with people and prepped a little bit on Mormonism, but a non-member doesn't know Mormonism unless you're watching Mormonism live for 5 years. So you get into a conversation and you only know Mormonism from a distance. You create so much safety for the other side to do tons of reframing, and you don't even catch that that's what's going on because you don't know the vernacular of the insider of the tribe. And so you sort of miss out.
Yeah,
on
that insider, you're not on the inside of that circle, so
right.
that's an advantage. That's leverage.
Right. Okay, so now we get into, I think that's the last one. We get into these Jacob Hansen case studies. You've got 3 video clips for us. I'm going to put the first one up on the screen, and you can prep us with whatever you want to say before I hit the play button. Let me take this one down, put this one up. By the way, I think he's better with a beard. That's anyway. So I'll stop there. Go ahead.
Which one is this one? Is this the chemical reaction one?
This is early. This was your clip 1.
Clip 1. Okay, got it. All right. So here we're gonna watch. It's about 3 minutes, right?
Yep. I think it's not that long.
I'm not gonna say what I think the audience hears yet.
Okay. So we'll just
I think the behavioral mechanisms here to look for is the reduction challenge, the semantic narrowing, false dilemma architecture, and the moral authority containment. So we went over some of those, maybe not all of those, but keep those in your mind as we watch this. And then I'll go over what I think he thinks the audience hears and what I hear.
Awesome. Here we go.
And even more, if you want to deconstruct even that conception of it, we're essentially chemical reactions in the cosmos, playing ourselves out over time. Is that an accurate way that you would say that you frame sort of who we are as human beings?
Yeah, that we are a species that has evolved from something lesser, and over time that started 13 point something billion years ago with the Big Bang, and that we are just one more creature on this planet trying to survive. Yeah.
And I guess when I look at that sort of a framework, and then I hear you say things like, and I've heard you in another podcast talk about there being like harm, right? Like don't cause harm to other people, right? Yeah. And would you say that people have an obligation, that people are obligated to follow that rule? Like, do they have a moral obligation to not harm other people?
Yeah. So because suffering hurts, because trauma causes people to be affected in ways that they are impacted throughout their life with negative feelings, negative ways of dealing with experiences and moments, I would certainly say that, yes, like I kind of sense where you're going. I would say that I want folks, again, me individually, I want folks to have the best, healthiest, most beneficial life experience that they can. And I want to do as much as I can to reduce suffering and pain and trauma in the world. Yes.
Okay. And so I guess, is that just a preference that you have, or is that something, because, like and by the way, just so you know, just so everyone knows, like I agree with that. Like I want people to minimize suffering and to maximize well-being. I'm a big Sam Harris fan, by the way. Obviously not of all the things that he says, but his Moral Landscape book, I think, is one of the most influential books on me, for me kind of orienting the nature of the moral discussion and moral philosophy generally. So my thing is this. So if we talk about, you want to minimize suffering, but what if, and you want to maximize the well-being of other creatures or of other human beings, let's say, okay? I guess my question is on what basis is anyone obligated to care about the well-being of not only any other human, but other animals or the planet or those kinds of things, if it doesn't benefit them, if sort of my well-being is the ultimate purpose of my existence?
Your thoughts, Dawn. What do you want to say here?
Okay, so what I think Jacob's audience was likely to hear is that if morality is not grounded in something that's transcendent, then compassion and obligation are reduced to preference. But what I hear in this is that Jacob is compressing secular moral reasoning into a colder and thinner version, than asking the reduced version to carry the full weight of the moral obligation. So the move here is to narrow the secular ethics until they sound like preference, chemistry, or survival instinct. Once secular morality feels unstable, or once it does, then the religious authority can re-enter as safer ground. And then the boundary here is I don't need to prove that Jacob intends manipulation. The structure functions by reducing the alternative and making the religious authority feel necessary.
Right. If we all just get to decide how the world works, then, you're going to have all kinds of outcomes, some of them good, bad. Who gets to decide? We need that big voice in the sky to say that the rules are hard and fast, and here's the lines in the sand. I hear that as well. The other thing I notice when this argument ever happens, the believer never deals with how their religious world is actually just as inconsistent and maybe even more inconsistent. And in Mormonism, you have this thing where they're supposed to be ahead of the times because we're led by prophet, seers, and revelators, but Mormonism being ran by 85-year-old men who have been in those positions forever, and it takes a majority to make any kind of change, ends up with that group often making any beneficial change decades and decades after the rest of the world does. And so even as he's trying to root morality and ethics in some sort of outer authority code given from the heavens, he doesn't want to deal with the flaws of that system, which may be worse than a bunch of second half of life individuals who have at least tamed their ego a little bit, making decisions based on what's best for humankind or for planet Earth collectively. Anything else you want to say there, RFM? Any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was here, but I really felt his Mormonism shone through in spite of himself when he was characterizing your position about, if you do something that's good just because that's how you're made, how do you get any credit for that? Do you remember when he said that? I think he said it twice. How do you get any credit for doing something good if you can't choose something bad? So it's very much focused and rooted in this
quite convenient
judgmental attitude.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Yeah, I agree. There is, again, not that he has to be conniving. I think there are plenty of moments where Jacob Hansen is conniving and figuring out behind the scenes how to manipulate or massage the conversation in the direction he wants it to go. But some of this can be completely unintentional. It's just the way that we're trained to defend our beliefs inside our brain. Anything else you guys want to say here?
I think he's more intentional. And I did want to just show one thing. If I can put this up on the stage here, I'm going to try and do this. This is for Friday night, but I have the first slide. I just want to put it up there. It is a Jacob Hansen case study, believe it or not. So let's see if we can put that up here. And I think that, what? Is it here? Oh, yeah, here it is. That's a Jacob Hansen case study. Is there anybody out there?
It must be his week.
I'm feeling like this is falling flat. I thought this was extremely funny. I went to a great deal of work behind the scenes while you were talking to come up with this.
I don't know who this is or what this is. I see the AB normal, but I don't even know what's going on here.
That is, oh my gosh. I'm happy to tell. It's from Young Frankenstein. This is Marty Feldman playing the part of Igor, who was sent by Dr. Frankenstein to the lab, the medical school, to get a brain. And he was supposed to get a normal brain, not an abnormal brain. But he was confused because he thought this belonged to a person whose name was Abby. And much hilarity ensued.
Okay. Well, there you go. Now that you explain it, I'm chuckling. Okay. All right. I'm going to take that back off.
Okay.
And put this back up. And then let me go to the next one here.
The point being that's a Jacob Hansen case study. That's the joke. The Abby normal.
Yeah, the abnormal.
I'm going to sell this joke.
Abnormal.
What do you want to say about this second clip?
So this one is going to be about racism, moral truth, and the preference collapse on here. So we're going to look for authority restoration mechanics, moral authority containment, and then comparative frame control and semantic narrowing. Let's see what we can pick, what your ears can pick up as he's talking.
I say this, I'm a theist. I believe that there is a God. I am a Christian first. And the reason I have chosen to be a Latter-day Saint is because of all of the Christian traditions, it seems to be the one that it has the best case for what God is doing today.
Can you stop that for a second? He was raised as a freaking Mormon, wasn't he? And here he's saying, I'm a Christian first, but the reason I choose to be a Mormon isn't because I was raised that way. No, it's because of this bullshit answer. That's reframing, right? Is that what you're called, reframing?
Yeah, or not even understanding what he's saying. Like,
Okay,
I don't know what
sure.
he's definitely reframing, but at the same time, I think he doesn't realize how that's being interpreted.
I chose Christianity because it's just a coincidence that I was born into Mormonism. I'm a Christian first. I choose Mormonism because it's the best form of Christianity, and it's just a coincidence that it's a form of Christianity I happen to have been raised in. That's his position.
It's also sort of a lot of hills. Like, you can make the argument that I'm a Scientologist because it's the closest thing I find to match the science of the universe. And everybody who knows anything about Scientology goes, that's BS. You really can't poke at it because it's sort of an ambiguous claim. You get to go, Mormonism has these overlapping similarities with these true things I find in the world, but it doesn't have anything. I'm not having a conversation around all the places it falls short, all the contradictions that don't add up. I'm simply picking where I want to rest my case, rather than all the material that would point otherwise. It's everybody gets to say their religion matches up with truth better than all the other religions. And how could you really ever argue with that? Or at least how could you convince anybody who's a believer that they're wrong? Okay.
I was unintentionally paraphrasing Richard Dawkins, not Dawson, by the way, not Richard Dawson, Richard Dawkins. Isn't it a remarkable coincidence? Almost everyone has the same religion as their parents. It always just happens to be the right religion.
Yeah. Okay.
The only one.
But yeah, he's born into it. He's a Mormon because he was born into it.
Yes.
And if he was a Scientologist, he'd be having a YouTube channel defending that too. All right, here's this.
That's my particular way of viewing it. And so if you were to say Mormonism is bad, and let's say you do, let's say that you convince me Joseph Smith was a liar and all that kind of stuff, I wouldn't then
at least on lots of cases he was. I mean, hold on. You just said if I could convince you that Joseph Smith was a liar, it is demonstrable on numerous occasions that he was.
That, and I'm not here to argue that. What I'm here to say, what I'm here to make the case of, is that if you were to convince me of that, I would still be a Christian. Why?
Aren't you already convinced of that? Hold on a minute. State your personal view. Is Joseph Smith on multiple occasions a liar?
I believe that Joseph Smith is like a human being and probably did.
Why do you never say yes or no?
Well, because I want to caveat the answer.
I have agreed with you at numerous points in this conversation. And you distance yourself. Whenever I ask you a question that pins you down, you avoid it. So is Joseph Smith on multiple occasions a liar?
Just like I am, yes.
Okay. Yes.
Lies sometimes.
Yes. No. In your face. Good job, Bill.
I knew if he
stayed brilliant.
I knew if he stayed with me, I could get him to admit that Joseph Smith was a liar. I actually was surprised he acknowledged he was one too.
Right?
And multiple times.
And then you did.
Don, is that thing he's doing to his nose? He's tweaking himself. Is that a tell?
That is probably, when you cover up your mouth, you're usually wanting to not say something or take back what you said. So
yes, he does.
I'm going to rewind that just a little bit so we can see the body language.
Oh my gosh, look at that.
Oh, look at this. Watch. Here we go. Yeah. No. Me too.
Oh, there's the nose.
So
yeah.
Here's what I'm going to say, though. Okay. Going back to the point.
That is kind of a way of soothing yourself, too.
At the very beginning. It's the idea here that you are launching a moral critique of the church, but that your moral critique of the church is ultimately just, there is no moral standard by which you think things can be judged anyway. So it
other than the church admits that I'm right after it changes its ways.
So you adopt the church's standards?
No, the church adopts mine.
I love it.
Then, so you're saying that the church is adopting the socially constructed fashions of the day.
Yeah. As Elder Holland says, the world goes here, and then I go here, and then the world goes here, and I go here.
All right. I would encourage everyone to watch the full thing. He was very clearly saying that's the problem.
Regardless,
the world,
isn't that true?
We chase
though?
The world. That's
the world and science have dictated that homosexuality is not a choice. The church has moved to that. Nobody received a revelation.
Yeah, I'm glad that the church. I'm glad.
That's not the point I'm making. I know you're glad.
I don't care what the church says. I care what's true. Bill. That's what I care about.
Okay.
And so if it's
That
true,
there.
and I want it.
What right there, Dawn? What right
That right there.
there? Reframing? What?
Okay. Is that the end of that one? Okay. I am all over this one.
Okay.
So, first of all, Jacob likely wants the audience to hear that Judeo-Christian tradition has produced moral truth more effectively than competing frameworks, right? So this is what I'm hearing. This is the same doorway most post-Mormons have walked through already. So he says, I care about the truth, not what the church says. That's often the beginning of deconstruction. The tension is that Jacob uses an independent, truth-seeking frame, but then works to preserve a religious authority structure inside that frame.
Yes.
So that sentence sounds like the beginning of deconstruction. And I probably shouldn't say that. I'm gonna keep going.
I don't think it's the beginning of deconstruction for Jacob. I think it's the continuation of pettifoggery.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so when what I'm saying that he is, it's the beginning of deconstructing truth over institutional authority is what I'm hearing here. He is using the language of an independent truth seeker, and that's what we are, right? So I've often thought that some of the apologetics are post-Mormons in the making. Like they haven't gotten there yet. They're fighting tooth and nail to hold on to their belief because it's terrifying. We've been through it. We know how scary it is, but they haven't. So they're fighting to continue that belief. The forensic question here, though, is whether that truth standard remains independent when it pressures the church or whether apologetics pull it back into institutional containment. So that's where those mechanisms come in.
And how does Jacob, after having made a spectacle of himself before the world, ever leave the church at this point, Dawn?
He might not have a choice at some point. It might be something that he receives that letter in the mail.
Do you think that's a possibility with Jacob?
There's times where he says things that it makes me wonder if that is going against what the church would want him to say, because he is out here representing them after all. So if he is not already been talked to, I could see that could be something in his, it could be something in his future. I could be completely wrong. It's just my opinion.
What is it that struck you the most that way of what he said?
He actually spoke the truth. I care about the truth, not just what the church says. He just said, I don't care what the church says. I only care about the truth, which is something I say, which is something I've heard you guys say. We want the truth.
He has shown a willingness to fight for orthodoxy, at least when it comes to the LGBT issue, for instance. And I think it's always a weird thing. Whenever you're born into Mormonism, 1840, 1910, 1985, whenever you're born into Mormonism, the Mormonism of your day is your Mormon orthodoxy.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't care that it got rid of things way before you, but you do care if it changes the Mormonism you grew up with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just note, like the biggest example we can give of reframing is that Jacob is so uncomfortable with the way the world decides what's true and what isn't, that he had to invent his own model, the collective witness model, that no one else ever, you don't get to invent the scientific method. And Jacob goes, no, I invented the scientific method. I'm so smart. I have created the methodology in order to know what's true or isn't. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to call it the collective witness model. The arrogance to run counter to the entire world, saying, I know better than everyone, but really he doesn't. What he did was he created the only workaround that would allow him to get away from his cognitive dissonance and not deal with the problems at hand.
And
go ahead, Arthur.
I was just going to say, and the amazing thing is that the instrument that Jacob the Mormon constructed to find out which church is true told him that Mormonism was true.
Exactly. So in here, his move shifts from can secular morality ground obligation to which tradition produces moral truth. So that allows the religious authority to re-enter the exchange as a safer framework again.
Yeah. Yeah. You're
If he
always
doesn't-
trying to get away from the problem.
I'm sorry. Can I just ask this question? I know he's not here. I wish he were. If Jacob's saying that he doesn't care what the church says, he cares what the truth is, then where does he get his ethics for his morality?
That's a good question.
Isn't he in the same boat with you then, Bill?
Yeah. He's willing to part from the church because his pursuit is truth at all cost. Hence, when the church gets things wrong, and it has, for instance, when he talks about there being confusion in the church because the church is handling the LGBT issue differently than he wants to handle it, he is parting ways, but he justifies his parting ways, but doesn't see the irony juxtaposed against his argument with me.
No, and then his benefit here, the benefit that you can look for in the next conversations is once that alternative has been made to look unstable, then the religious frame can come back and rescue structure as a rescue structure. So it worked for him in this particular situation because the audience may not have picked that part up.
Yeah. Yeah. The folks that follow him also want the church to be true at all cost. And most of his
We
followers
invest a lot into it.
Yeah, but they're a different type of, he's a different type of Mormon, and the people who align with him are a different type of Mormons. They want things to stay the way they were in certain ways. And I don't know if that's because he has a discomfort with his own prejudices and bigotries that he doesn't want the church to get too accepting, because then that would mean he's wrong.
That is so true in so many ways. You know, in corporate America, I can say that change sucks. A lot of people hate change. Anytime you change a policy or you change a process, it is so difficult. And one of the things that I push for is embrace the change. Change brings new energy. But here you have Mormons, and myself included, when I was still active, is change is terrifying because we don't know anything different. That's all you know.
Yeah. All right. This last one of the two, it's a part 1 and a part 2, but one of the segments is a little long. I want you to set this up. What's going to go on here, or do you want people just to hear it first and we can talk about it after?
Well, what we're going to hear here is the Coke can and a little bit of his determinism, and then the moral responsibility collapse. So there's a lot in the very beginning, and then there's some at the very end, but there's context in the middle. So as you're listening to this, listen for agency-dependent morality. We're also looking for the reduction challenge and the semantic narrowing. So let's see what he starts off with.
The moral outrage that you're saying, like you can say, this is what, this person did X, this group of people did Y.
Yeah.
This was all determined by the great cosmic chemical reaction that's going on here. No one's making any choices in this at all. And what you're left with isn't any sort of there's no morality in that. It just is what's happening, right? The morality posits this idea that we can do otherwise. Because if you can't do otherwise, then it doesn't make any, if Brigham Young couldn't help but be a racist and believe the things that he believed based on his social conditioning, and you can only believe what you believe based on your social conditioning, you dissolve the entire concept of not only moral truth, but the concept of truth at all. The only truth there is that you're a chemical reaction playing itself out according to the laws of nature. And I guess what I'm saying is,
couldn't that be true though? I mean, isn't it, again, I know you believe in God, but isn't it possible there is no God?
I don't believe, I do not believe it is. I can believe that there's a possibility that there is no God, but
does science have an explanation?
There is no explanation for human agency.
There's no explanation. Hold on a minute.
There's human agency is as real as reality itself. In my opinion, there's nothing more real than my ability to make a choice.
You're calling it human
self-evident.
agency, but I can show you that animals are making the same sorts of decisions. So now it can't be human agency. It has to be something else.
Let's just say agency. I don't necessarily disagree with the fact that animals have some level of agency as well. But it's
very close to ours. They don't have the stories we have to apply to it, but the chimps, in terms of how they treat each other and how they act, is very comparable to the same sorts of behaviors we humans do. The only difference is we apply a narrative to it.
Okay.
So animals
may have
whatever
agency.
Humans have.
Maybe they
animals
have
have
agency.
the same degree of agency to the same sort of extent.
I would agree with that. I do provisionally hold that view.
An animal. You're muted, RFM.
I know this goes on for a bit, and I apologize, but I just want to insert what a great job you're doing by inserting animals into the conversation as a counterpoint, and his agreeing to it, because I don't know if it actually gets stated, but I think that by his definition, that means that animals, to some degree, also have morality.
And they do. We can show different tribes of chimpanzees. They're in a place called Gombe, where they're fighting over territories. They're choosing who to go to battle with. They're trying to protect lines in the sand, and they're making an active choice to go to war. Meanwhile, other primates are grooming each other in order to have primate connection with each other, to build loyalty. Like, they're all the kinds of things that play out in humanity play out again in the animal world. And I'll just note too, by the way, and I don't know if I get into it, but the argument that there is free will, there's not free will, it's highly contested. There is an equal number of brilliant people on both sides of that argument. And for him to go like, it's just a given, there's free will. That's a claim that you can argue for it or against it, but to say it's an absolute thing ignores the fact that the smartest people in the world are debating whether there is free will or there isn't. So he's making a pretty big claim of certainty where the rest of the world wouldn't have it.
And can I add here for the audience to say, because it wasn't immediately clear to me, although I have seen it before, that what's going on here, correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, is that Bill and Jacob has now managed to get Bill into having a discussion about a certain belief that Bill has, which is a side belief. I mean, it's not secondary, it's tertiary, about whether free will even exists or whether what we do is a natural course of who we are and everything, okay? I mean, this is what they're talking about. And I see Jacob here as I do often, as he's trying to run out the clock on this. It's like he's always trying to get to the end without the other side laying a glove on his pretty face. Dawn, what do you see going on here?
I see he's coming at, there's so many different angles he throws in, he's tossing in. And I think in a way, when you do that, you're throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing which one sticks. There's a lot of different options he has, and he's waiting for the gotcha on Bill.
And he has put the burden of proof on Bill now, so that Bill is defending what he believes. And I know that's something you accepted, Bill, knowingly. It's not like he did it without your knowing participation.
His consent.
He didn't fool you, but you knew what he was doing when he was doing it.
By the way, if folks go back and watch this, or you have watched it, I want you to notice that even knowing the games that Jacob plays, I am more than happy, because it's a conversation, and he should get the chance to walk me down lines of logic the same way I would like the opportunity to walk him down lines of logic. Notice that when he asks me questions, I'm more than happy to take the time to explain my answer. And if he asks follow-up questions, I'm more than happy to clarify. But Jacob doesn't do the same. He knows what places in his beliefs are vulnerable, and he does everything he can to put up his fortifications and his moats so that nobody can get to those parts of him.
And can you tell the audience whether there were any preconditions or conditions placed upon this discussion between you and Jacob by Jacob?
It was several years ago, so I don't remember per se, but I know that I titled it an honest conversation. Again, it ended up not being on his part, I don't think, but I titled it an honest conversation because I really wanted it to be him and I figuring out better why he believes and why I think Mormonism isn't true. And I wanted it to be a long form conversation where he would let me ask him questions, that he would be a good actor, a good faith actor, and allow me to walk the logic out on what he's saying to the same extent that I happily let him walk me out on the logic of what I was saying.
Okay. Well, you're fair, if nothing else.
Tried to be, for sure. Okay, let me continue here. Well, somehow arrived at having that without any grasp of religion or God at all.
That they have
They weren't.
agency?
They were not. Let me say it differently.
I agree. Like I don't think you need. I believe that you can have agency.
They weren't affected by the. What I'm trying to say here is that he agreed that animals have agency, essentially the same as humans, but they didn't need an outer authority to give them a biblical law and give them scriptures and tell them how to make those decisions. They're just doing it because it's what the natural life of planet Earth does.
Does he realize the thin ice he's on?
When I start to ask questions, he quickly let me jump in. Let me say something.
Yes.
He doesn't want to let you walk out the logic of the question to the listener. He wants to again reframe it and move into some other space. And this is his MO. I mean, if anybody wants to argue that Jacob doesn't do this, he does it on every single conversation he has. He does not want you poking holes in his structures because he knows where it's easy to poke the holes at. All right, here we go. Judeo-Christian framing. They were not impacted by that at all, and yet they still arrive at a place where they collaborate, have reciprocity, have empathy.
But do you see you're presupposing that is something good rather than that is something that just is?
No, I'm saying it just is, but it's why monkeys are still around and have been for as long as they have, because the only way that species of life generally survives and perpetuates is by reciprocity, empathy, collaboration. Hence,
but only
if we made it this far,
but only within their own tribe, right? It doesn't make any.
Animals are nice to other animals too. No, I disagree.
No, they can be. But what I'm saying is, when push comes to shove, you have to make a choice, and it would. And if you want to go down the sort of supremacist argument, like fine, I think that scientifically makes sense. Back to the horse example. Right? Like it makes sense that you take care of your best horses, the ones that are not going to make it or that are not beneficial to the tribe, that they get kind of set aside. And what you find is that is the human ethic throughout essentially all of human history until very recently.
I don't need God to create morality because animals have done it too. Now you're back to going like, yeah, but we don't know if it's good morality or bad morality.
You don't create anything. If you don't have agency, you're just a chemical reaction playing itself out. So
can I ask you another question?
You don't get to say.
If you have to have this outside authority to tell you what the ethics are, and basically during the time period he's talking about, at least for the last 2,000 years, would be the Bible with Christianity, okay? And the Western world, why is it that up until recently, there's been such a difference in ethics and that you just take care of the best and you let the others go to hell or kill them, or whatever. And that until recently, now we've changed it. And now we look after the ones who are not, the race horses, the ones who might be weaker or have more vulnerabilities. He says that's more recent. But how does that make sense when the morality is still coming from the same place, the Bible?
Right. If the God of 2,000 years ago showed up differently than the God of today, then there hasn't been any consistency to base your beliefs on a consistent outer authority voice out in the universe that tells us definitively what's right and what's wrong.
It sounds like it's all coming from inside of us. And we look at some third party that we agree with, who says what's inside of him, and then we think, okay, that's coming from outside.
But even that comes from some person in the tribe who goes, I talk to the outer voice out in the universe. So your job is to listen to me as I tell you the rules that he told me. None of us have a conversation with God knowing right or wrong. And we can demonstrate that in Mormonism, anybody who did claim to talk to God and know right from wrong, many of those positions have been abandoned and disavowed and reversed. Hence, there is no assurity about what that outer voice is saying and the consistency of it.
This is why Jacob should stick to talking about the Trinity.
Yeah. And talking to non-Mormons.
Yes.
I created this or they created that and he did the right thing and he did the wrong thing. There just is what is.
Other than if there's not collaboration, reciprocity, empathy, then the species ends up dying. They don't make it. So the reason we made it this far is because we had those components and we developed those components as an act of survival. So if we didn't work together, human beings don't make it. If we're out on the African Serengeti and there's 10 of us and we all are selfish, we all completely selfish, we all get eaten by lions. So evolution benefited our survival was benefited by the evolutionary mechanisms of collaboration, of reciprocity.
There's another
empathy.
Presupposition there that survival is better than non-survival.
That's where he lost me. That's where he lost me.
Totally derailed.
Sorry, what the hell are you even talking about? He's got to see the Titanic going down, and he's going down first on the Titanic because this is crazy. He's got to get away from what you're saying. You're eviscerating him to the point he's got to get away any way he can, even if he's going to say something dumbass as, well, that depends on whether you think that survival is a good thing.
How many times has he moved the goalpost just in the last 2 minutes of conversation? It's insanity. And every time he says something, I show him that his thinking has blind spots and he just moves to another hill. He just goes somewhere else.
And he wants you to follow him. That's the whole thing. He's baiting you. He wants you to follow him to take you away from where you are crucifying him.
How's it working for him?
Not well. Look at his face. This is the face of a guy it's not working well for.
Yeah. Okay, let me continue here. Obviously here. So we've made it this far. So we're talking about it.
And but the thing is I think there's another moral quandary that I get into when I explore that kind of atheist worldview is that I don't know if it's all evolution. Most animals, most life suffers immensely and then it dies, and it has historically. And I think it may continue that way and probably will, at least for the animal kingdom and things like that. And so if I use this example, if I'm on a train to Auschwitz and I'm enjoying a nice cheeseburger, I'm listening to good music and it's nice, would it be better for us to stop the train? Or would it be better, I'm having a good time, so keep the train rolling? I think when we look at the entire project of life, the big picture project, there's a serious question to say, it seems to be mostly suffering and then people die. It seems like a train to Auschwitz. Just because me and you are in our privileged position as human beings who are, living in this time, which is incredibly abundant, are having a fairly good go of it. We're eating the cheeseburger on the train to Auschwitz.
Is he coming to this conversation with that? Is this his plan? Or is this just him ad hocing it?
This is ad hoc. This is
him. Oh my
now.
gosh.
Hansen is famous for his dumbass analogies, and you should add a special one to your list for him. It's called dumbass analogies. This is one of them. And I'm going to have a comment to make about it.
I could put in there, I'd have to be careful. I could put in there, please tell me when someone is just being a pure dumbass. And then maybe we could get something out of that.
So basically, we're all on the same train to the grave, but some of us have better.
Some of us are having fun while we're on that train, is what he said.
I think that's it. Yeah.
If religion isn't real, if Mormonism isn't true, how does the false idea that it is necessarily make the train ride any better? Again, he might point to people suffering from nihilism, but there is so many people who go, I deconstructed Mormonism, I deconstructed religion, I stepped away from all that myth, and I'm so happy and better off that I did. So it's a mixed bag regardless. And just because a belief gives you more joy, or you think there's a heaven on the other side, doesn't make it true. It doesn't make it that the train ride is any better. And maybe if you knew where you were headed, that the gas chamber's on the other side and it is real, maybe you'd do something different. Death is coming no matter what. Why would you want to spend 10% of your money and all your time and energy and resources staying in a religion that's just lying to you and hiding things from you and doesn't have the truth claims holding up that it claims does?
What he's going to end up saying is that there's nothing you can do to change the amount of good or bad in the universe. Isn't it that what he says, Bill? And I just thought, well, cut your cheeseburger in half and give half of it to somebody else, dumbass. Now, Asti Destry Rides Again noted the problem with that because it's a freaking cheeseburger. And a Jewish person wouldn't eat it, at least not if they're observant, right? But I don't know, maybe they take the freaking cheese off and give them their hamburger.
And I don't think anybody on the train was given a nice meal on the way either.
No, it never occurs to him to give somebody his cheeseburger. That is so revealing. It's the obvious answer to this conundrum he's going to propose.
All right, I'm going to keep going. We'll see where this goes.
And again, but real quick, just before any answer to that, this is the sort of moral questioning and reasoning that is at the heart of this. What does it mean? Is life good? What is good? Right? And my thing is if you say that we are just chemical reactions playing themselves out over time, we can't stop the train. We can't do anything. It just, what is, and that's all there is.
That's not true. So even without free will, the fact that somebody didn't use agency to tune in this morning, for instance, as they're listening to you and I have a conversation, they are having thoughts enter their brain. Again, can't help it. They're having thoughts enter their brain about this conversation and whose point of view is making more rational sense and which one's not. And they're impacted in such a way that in the very next moment, they now have more tools in their tool bag to operate by that they didn't have the moment before. And so while there isn't free will in the way that most people believe, yet by you experiencing life, you are changed and you are made different. And that change allows you. Say what?
Could it have been otherwise?
No.
So if it couldn't have been otherwise, then nobody gets any credit in this and nobody gets any condemnation. You don't get credit for being more rational or less rational, and they don't get any credit for listening and choosing to respond the way they do.
Except that in the...
I have to agree with Jacob there. I think he does get credit for being less rational.
Why does it matter to him that somebody gets credit?
Or condemnation? This is his whole modus operandi. This is his raison d'etre, is there has to be a system to judge the people that he doesn't like and to give credit and good things to people that he does.
He needs his family who left to be punished, and he needs he who stayed to be rewarded. It's a strange thing because I don't even think in those terms.
Well, he won't even wait for God to do it on Judgment Day. He's got to get ahead of the game and start orchestrating letter writing campaigns to people's state presidents to try and get them excommunicated, like Julie de Azevedo.
Yeah, he seeks out punishments.
Yeah, he's Judgy McJudgerson.
Yeah, that it is an insight into how his brain works and how he wants people to be elevated and other people to be diminished.
There's definitely a lot of inconsistencies, incongruencies even.
Yeah. Subjective world, we've deemed that we want to reduce suffering and allow human beings to flourish, and hence we're going to create boundaries. We're going
could we create a world with less suffering in it? Could it be otherwise than it's going to be based on the way the chemical reaction is going to play itself out?
It would be highly...
Oh God, could he let you finish the sentence?
Closed systems where people pretend they talk to God.
No.
And there's no ability to criticize the system.
I get that. What I'm saying is that you're presupposing agency when you presuppose that
we have no choice but to do that. Yeah, we can't help it. That's the way we're going to formulate the conversation. That's the language we're going to use. So I get it. You're trying to constantly poke at this idea that I say there's choice and there's not. I 100% agree with you. That's the way it is in terms of what prevailing scientists say and how I believe the world will work.
Just to clarify, to make sure I understand. So you are saying that the future is going to be the way it's going to be. It's determined by the way this chemical reaction is going to play itself out. And that we don't actually alter it. We just are part of the chemical process that's playing itself out.
Yes, but with the caveat that when we think we're making choices, we don't. So for instance, if we convinced people right now through this conversation that everything is hopeless, it's all predestined, don't worry about making any effort, the way that they're going to go forward and live their life is going to be completely different than if we say, hey, you can make a difference. Get out there and go do something.
So you do, so you do presuppose that it could be otherwise.
No. And again, maybe you're just not comprehending the perspective of those who say that agency is extremely limited, and yet why we as a people still act as if
could I try and steel man you for a second?
Sure.
Could I try just steel man you?
Right.
So
you can steel man me anytime.
So this is so if I'm getting you right, you're saying that because we're having this conversation.
In fact, you could just try steel manning me once. That would be great, right?
I think we all know what Jacob means when he says steel manning.
It will affect someone else to potentially to do something differently. It can change the trajectory of what they would have done had they not listened to this conversation.
And yes,
that is why this conversation matters. And what we do actually matters is because what we do can alter future outcomes.
Yes, but that has nothing to do with free will. It is completely separate from agency or free will.
And I guess what my thing is if we couldn't help but choose to have this like if we were determined to have this conversation, like it couldn't have been otherwise, and that other person couldn't have chosen not to listen, and their reaction to the conversation couldn't have been otherwise, and their future actions couldn't have been otherwise, then in what sense are we actually doing anything? In what sense do we, like, we're just, if anything, at best, we're observers to a chemical reaction playing itself out, deluding ourselves with the ideas of these myths that what we do actually matters and impacts future states of the world.
I have a question for you. Bill, because, I'm not on the same position that you're in, okay? I do think that there is such a thing as agency. So I want to ask you this question. At this point in your discussion with Jacob, could he choose to be honest?
My argument is no. The chemical reaction of the universe leading up to Jacob's birth and all the experiences that were going to happen to him anyway, he is predestined to be deceptive and manipulative in all the conversations that he's in around Mormonism.
So it's like secular Calvinism.
It is. By the way, this whole argument is useless because, as you were pointing out earlier, RFM, even if we agree there's agency outside of the Calvinist, all the other realms of Christianity and tons of other religions agree with that as well. We're not making any progress on determining whether Mormonism is true. Having a half-hour battle over whether agency exists serves zero purpose in figuring out whether Mormonism's truth claims hold up.
And that's why he's doing it.
Exactly. It's a distraction. It's a reframing, isn't it?
He's got a caveat. He's got one of those every turn. Every turn, he's got a new one.
Yep. Yes and no. So again, with the caveat that pain hurts.
I have
emotional pain hurts, physical pain hurts. And while
and do you think we can actually alter the amount of pain that's going to be in the future in the world?
I think my determined effort that isn't based in free will to continue to have conversations and to shine a light on things that I think are unhealthy, to me, shows the evidence that I am reducing suffering in the world. And hence I get the feedback that motivates. The trouble is, at this point, you're essentially, you're pushing back against any time that I use agency as if we have it, versus also saying we don't have free will.
Well, I guess I would say my point
Yeah.
point in this, just to try and like clarify why I'm bringing this up, and the connection
Yeah.
here is because if we're going to talk about morality at all in
Yeah.
any sort of a meaningful sense, I don't understand how morality as we conceptualize it as human beings exists if
Yeah.
ultimately, a Coke can fizzing is a chemical reaction. It's just going to play itself out. There's no morality in that. It's just doing what it does.
A Coke can doesn't feel things. And so I feel, again, my subjective position is that I feel obligated to reduce suffering in the world. Now, I may be determined in doing that, and yet something in my brain tells me to keep doing it. And so I'm going to keep doing it. And I feel subjectively that such is of benefit to, because humans, because they're different than other animals, their degree of sentience with language, and also to some species, which most animals do, but not all, to some species have a central nervous system. We feel things hurt. Having people deal with pain, you can go like, oh yeah, it's, we're just chemical reactions. That's fine. That's true. But I don't use it the way you use it. I simply would disagree with you.
And you would say, to kind of steal in here, that a person who reduces the amount of suffering in the world is doing something good, and a person who increases the amount of suffering in the world is doing something bad. And that creates sort of a moral barometer for goodness and badness. I guess my only thing
is entirely subjective.
I would look at that and say, but you can't control the future states of the world are already predetermined. The amount of suffering that's going to be is what's going to be. And so my thing is that it dissolves this idea of morality as any sort of a meaningful concept, because only moral agents can be morally good or morally bad.
No, when people believe they have the ability to choose, they will lead a different track of life than if they're convinced they have no choice.
I sense that Jacob is somewhat disappointed that he's not going to be able to judge the Coke can.
Oh
man, you held your ground on coming back to the facts over and over and over and over again. And I don't think he let you finish a single thought through that whole clip.
Notice, by the way, that I let him finish. Like, I'll say
let him
no in the middle of the sentence,
and you brought it right back.
But then I let him finish his thought. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what Jacob likely wants the audience to hear that is that if humans are determined chemical systems, then morality, responsibility may collapse. And then what I'm hearing is Jacob is tying moral accountability to a specific agency model. And Bill, if you can't preserve enough agency, then Jacob's frame makes secular moral responsibility appear unstable. So that's this whole clip was kind of a shit show when it came to trying to determine which direction he was going. And I don't know how you were able to keep your focus, because I was losing focus just listening.
I think the reason he was doing that so much is because he kept encountering these walls that Bill was putting up, and he can see exactly where that's going to, and he's going to run right into a brick wall if he keeps going that way. So he goes this way, here's another wall. He goes this way, here's another wall. And you see him going like this is what he looks like, because he keeps trying to avoid the walls or the traps or the pitfalls, whatever you want to call them, the truth that Bill is trying to make him confront, and he will not confront it.
Yeah, and so his argument makes morality depend on a particular version of agency. And if humans cannot do this otherwise, then moral responsibility is made to look like a category error. I mean, it doesn't prove Jacob is trying to frighten people, but it does show that the structure pressures is pushing this towards the collapse unless it can satisfy his agency threshold. So the claim is not just that humans make choices. The claim is that without Jacob's kind of agency, that moral responsibility starts to disappear.
Yeah, and you know, somewhere along the way, you'd be like, okay, you are smart and have an articulate response on the other side. Let's just agree to disagree. But if he lets it go, he loses. Anyway, so we're up against 8 o'clock. I want to try to. Do you want to get? I'll give you kind of a choice, Dawn. We can either play the second part, sort of finish up there, or we can try to skim across maybe a couple of the other reports really quickly. Do you have a preference on which one we do?
Let's talk about Gurr a little bit.
Okay, let me put.
Do you want to talk about Gurr a little bit?
Yep, let me put this back up. Get past all of these, and skip that. That's Jacob. Okay. Let's start here. So in the Robert Gurr debate with me, what did you arrive at that I did effectively? What did Robert do effectively? Who controlled the framing, and why do facts sometimes lose to narratives?
Yeah. So I'll push back on you a little bit. Some fair critique of this debate. So there was absolutely moments where he was pushing you aside and hijacking the your frame, basically. And I mostly blame the host for that. I don't know that you can call him a host. He wasn't moderating. He wasn't doing anything. He was talking about a timer, and that's really all I heard him say was something about setting the timer so that you guys stayed on time. But you guys managed your own time. You both did actually pretty well. So from a criminological standpoint, that temporary sideline was actually a great favor to you, and actually for me, because it made it so that I could see more than I would have seen otherwise. So it basically created what I call what in cybersecurity we call a tactical honeypot. So by holding that empirical baseline like you do and letting him do all the talking, you allowed him to build this massive, highly visible, I call it scaffolding, for the lack of any better word, that not even just for me, but for the entire audience. So you gave him the space to expose a lot of that entire mechanism. So he thought he was probably outmaneuvering you with that critical thinking, like, let's use critical thinking, Bill. In reality, he was handing a criminologist a pristine artifact of systemic overextension. So the evidence never got stronger on his part, where his explanations did get more desperate and adjustable, and you just let him dig the hole, and my engine simply, like I said earlier, just audited that shovel. I just put a bow on it.
What did you think about his argument that the Nephites ate the horses?
Oh, man. Oh, let's see. I think I might have notes on that. Let me look here. Hold on. Because he said about the steel, he was talking about the horses.
Yes.
No, I don't think I have notes on that one. But as far as, I mean, when you're grasping at straws, you've already lost the argument. You don't even have a fight in this battle anymore, because you're grasping at straws. You're throwing anything and everything in there, trying to make it make sense. And the math ain't mathin' when it comes to those bones. There's, who ate all the bones?
He really didn't have to go there. He could have just
I
left
wouldn't
it
have
with,
gone
we don't
there.
know that they went extinct because, I mean, show me the last ores, right? They could have lived on.
Yeah.
They could have been there, and you can't prove me wrong. But then he just went too far. Then he came
An
up with
effort to
his
be
theory.
clever. He was trying to be clever, trying to come up with something, maybe a new analogy for it, and it backfired bad.
Yes, the Nephites ate the horses, and then I'm convinced that the bison ate the Nephites.
Yes. Yeah.
Diamond Dave came on a couple months back with RFM and I thought it was quite an insightful thing that he said. He said, Robert was deflecting and distancing and reframing at times through the conversation, but for whatever reason, when it came to child brides,
Mm.
he decided that this was the hill he was going to die on. And instead of giving, again, I was totally unexpecting of his response. I thought I knew all the possibilities of places he would go. I never considered that he would actually justify child brides to the degree that he did. And I'm curious what you made of that. Why did, what were some of the insights that you noticed about that part of the conversation? And because it seemed like such a strange way for him to defend Mormonism.
Yeah, so this was like the polygamy and presentism part of it that it's baffling. So when he tried to defend Joseph Smith for marrying young girls and claiming the colonial adoption, this is what I heard growing up. My step-parents or my stepfather used to tell me that this is the way it had to be because there was more women than men, or whatever the reason was. It's the fallacy of presentism. So predatory grooming sequences are definitely present in his own language, and it's not a geographical or historical it's not dependent on that. So creating this vulnerability and establishing trust and redefining boundaries, and then applying a spiritual applying spiritual pressure is a behavioral sequence. So to me, that is at the very least in support of grooming. And in this day and age, being a supporter of child grooming is a bad thing. So it's just systemic inversion designed to sanitize this institutional abuse.
And let's presume for purposes of this conversation that Robert Gurr is not a child predator, okay? Let's presume that, because he probably isn't. But this is what Mormonism does to its members, is it will make its members defend the most atrocious conduct in the name of protecting their prophet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's in your, it's, you could say it's systemic, but it's also within your own belief system. So systemically inside yourself, your cells, your thoughts, everything about what you believe is based on what has to be true. And if one part of it isn't true, then the walls keep, it's starting to crumble, and we're still sticking more bricks and more mortar on the bricks to keep the wall standing.
Yes. And when I was new in the church, I heard that same excuse about they did polygamy in early Mormonism because there were more women than men. But then I found out as I got older that wasn't true. The real reason is because there were more girls than boys.
Yeah, there are all these answers that we have. By the way, I don't think in this entire conversation I asked the question I do to, I asked Jim Bennett, I asked Jackson Washburn, would you allow Joseph Smith to
Absolutely not. No.
I'll just say though, I didn't ask Robert that question.
Oh,
my brain understood, and I also understood that the entire audience understood that he was going to just answer yes unflinchingly. It wouldn't have accomplished anything. He is
high probability
okay with a world where God commands grown men to take children into romantic relationships. So there was no use in asking the question. So I avoided.
No, it's that authority where the authority of the role is more important than the morality.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let me jump ahead. So there's the debate, and I've got little things of good, and folks, you can just pause the screen and read them. I'll stop for a second on each one, but I make notes about things that were in your report about the Robert Gurr conversation. Folks can stop it and read those. There should be one or two more of these.
Plus, you have them linked in the discussion
Yeah,
in
I
the
can do that.
notes.
I can take the slideshow, make a PDF of it, and stick it in the show notes as well. I just want to take just 10 more minutes, and then we'll end tonight. I want to give you a second just to talk about the Mormon Stories lawsuit, and you know, be as concise as you can, but you know, cover whatever you think is important. Why does the timing matter? Is this really seem like trademark protection? What behavior patterns stood out to you here? What would a criminologist look for that maybe lawyers might miss?
And I'm just going to say this is my opinion, right? All of this is just my opinion. The timing matters is because there's a lot of things that happened right before this took place, and that you guys have talked about it. We've heard it on other channels. The prophet died, a new prophet came in, and that there was a difference of like when you get a CEO in a new organization, they usually like to bring in their own pals. So what do they have to do? They have to wipe out the existing pals, replace them, and then you get a whole new set of rules and policies, and that's all going to trickle down. So that's where we're at. We're seeing this trickle down situation coming through the church, and old processes are being regenerated. Now they're bringing back, they want Mormonism now all of a sudden after 10 years of it being on sabbatical. It wasn't ever allowed back in, so it was just being held out there. But one of the things that I think is important when I look at word usage and how words matter, I identified as a Mormon. Nobody owns that identity except for me. So when I say this is my Mormon stories, now this can be a stretch. I'll give you that. I may not be right. I'm just saying this is my opinion on this. So we all have our own Mormon stories. We all have our own experiences. A lot of them are very similar. Some of them are very different. The fact that John was able to use the name Mormon Stories since the beginning in 2005. And they excommunicated him in 2015. Now, this timeline matters a lot because after the excommunication, they forgot to excommunicate his Mormon Stories. They excommunicated John Dehlin, but they did not excommunicate Mormon Stories. So it's a lapse in their part, in my opinion, that I don't know where they're going to go with this. But there's so many others out there, you guys included. There's a lot of people using the term Mormon. In my book, I call it, I'm writing my memoir, Sealed to My Abductor, and in it says, I talk about the Mormon religion being weaponized and how it was weaponized and who was used as a weapon. And there's a lot of conversations that are going on out there that can't sue everybody, and making an example out of one organization is not going to be enough to stop that. So that being said, I feel like the timing of the trademark is their excuse. I think that the prophet that's standing is the whole thing. It's what changes he wants to implement. Maybe he did or didn't agree with Nelson. Maybe he sees things differently. Like you often say, if past was a different country, they do things different there. That's exactly what's going on here.
Yeah, that Monson didn't go again. I don't know I don't know if Hinckley was still alive when John started his podcast, but Monson didn't do anything and Nelson didn't do anything, right?
Look what I found in the pile of evidence in one of the storage units.
What is it? This
is the I'm a Mormon card, and on the back, the missionaries would write their names on it. I guess I shouldn't dox anybody, but the missionaries wrote their names and cell phone numbers and stuff on the back, and then they'd pass this out.
Yes.
So this is during Monson.
I do remember those.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Oakes, who is different than Nelson and Monson because he's a lawyer, gets into be president of the church, and immediately he wants to handle certain legal things very differently than the ones before him.
It's almost like he had those executive orders ready to roll.
Oh, yeah. He's unleashed.
And that makes sense. The moment I knew I was going to be bishop, a week or two before I'm called, because I sit down with the stake president, I say yes, all this stuff happens. It takes a week or two before I'm actually called. I'm already in my head, like I'm reading the handbook and I'm putting thoughts into what the ward is going to look like under my leadership versus the guy before me. It makes perfect sense that as Nelson is approaching death, Oakes is immediately going like, when I'm prophet someday, if I get the chance to be prophet, here's what the church is going to look like for me.
I think he had 10 years to plan that, because, living until you're 104 years old is not very common. So
No.
at any moment, it could happen at any moment. There's a lot of time that he had to plan for this, all I'm saying.
He has been waiting for the time when he can get that mother effer Dehlin.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna skip this. So if the church's motives were innocent, what might we expect to see differently? I'll just note we would have seen them go after Mormon stories immediately if it really was about a trademarked Mormon. It also seems crazy, right, that they fight over things that they did after John did. For instance, the color blue. So there are certain things that stand out.
And all of that is you can go back in the Wayback Machine and you can get evidence of that. So
I'm telling you, Curtin McConkie is like the McDonald's of law firms.
And if they do have 200 lawyers, and I'm sure they have a lot of trademark or copyright or that line of lawyers going on in there, then why wasn't somebody already saying, hey, we need to protect our trademark? That's their job. But we also know that in order to maintain a trademark, it has to be published on a website. So at least that's my experience. So in order for me to get my trademark, it had to be visible on a page that I gave them, and they had to be able to see it. And I have to maintain that the entire time, or I could lose my trademark. So they already lost their trademark.
President Nelson really screwed this up, didn't he?
Absolutely.
This is why for the past 10 years, President Oakes has looked like he's got no sleep at all. He's just tossing and turning.
Well, and the message to me that's sent is that if every president can come in of the church who are prophets, seers, and revelators, then why are they acting like they are the president of a country instead of a religion that presumably speaks to God? And if God is an omnipresent, then God doesn't make mistakes. Then how come the prophets, seers, and revelators are misunderstanding the one true source? None of that is jiving with me. It's not. It's not mathing.
As it turns out, God has this terrible speech impediment. A lot of people don't know.
Maybe because he's too far away and the transmission.
Well, that was the last slide I had. I had some other things if we had leftover time that were more sort of out in the weeds. But that's everything. I did just post a link in the live chat if somebody did want to come on and ask Dawn a question or make a comment about tonight. I think the Jacob Hansen clips were quite entertaining and really humorous and educational to see his mind at work at how he
breaking it down, slowing it down. Yeah, you got to slow it down a little bit. Sometimes you have to rewind. You got to check out those baselines. If something's off, when you've set a baseline and you get to know somebody's expressions, then you'll notice those anomalies here and there. And also with the Mormon stories, I mean, I want to make sure that I'm being serious about that particular situation. It is very serious, and that's why on his review, the forensic brief I did, I didn't do the same type of brief I did with the podcast with you and Jacob. That's what I call an executive review. But for the Mormon stories, when I actually did an evidentiary review, so I have different modes, and I can tell it run an evidentiary review, and that should be something that it might be able to be admissible in court. So it's very legally sound, or at least as much as I can make it that way. An attorney would have to determine whether or not that is admissible or not. But then we have that executive view, which is just a step down from that. It's not so tight. It's a little bit easier for most people to understand. And then I even go down into a victim or survivor point of view, because we want to be able to validate things that went on so that if they have any artifacts or source material, there could be a validation for them. And then I also have an editor point of view so that I can write articles based off of some of these things. But for Mormon stories, I went with the full gamut on that one, because I wanted it to be as serious as I could make it, or at least as airtight as I could.
Excellent, excellent. So nobody's down in the chat, so I'm gonna sort of end this here, but I just want to say thank you, Dawn, for coming on.
Thank you. This was fun.
Yeah, there are patterns to see that aren't the normal way that we go about it. Often as we came across these are things that RFM and I have pointed out over and over again in what the apologist is doing, but you allowed us to sort of see the overarching pattern of that happening. And so really appreciate you bringing your expertise onto the show. I just want to say to folks, you're welcome. I just want to say to folks, please go to mormonismlive.org. We survive on donations. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, Radio Free Mormon and myself. We depend deeply on your support. And so thank you to all of you who support the program, who do donate, whether it's once a year or a recurring donation of every month or whatever it is. It means a lot to us. And if for those of you who maybe up to this point haven't donated, you get a lot of value from our program. You've thought about supporting us, but you haven't as of yet. Would you please consider going to mormonismlive.org, click the donate button, and just something simple, $5 a month, $10 a month. Again, I know that other places, when they talk about donations, they'll say it's only the cost of a cup of coffee. It really is a small amount for one person, but when hundreds of you sign up to be supporters of the program and to donate, that adds up quickly and allows us to do the work that we do. And so we're creating episodes almost every day of the week at this point. And there's a lot of you that support the program. So again, thanks to you, but we really do need your support. And so those of you out there who aren't, might you consider this plea the moment where you tips the scale and you go over to mormonismlive.org and click that donate button and set up a recurring donation. Thank you to all of you who tuned in tonight. Thank you, RFM. Thank you, Dawn. And we'll see all of you again next Wednesday, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. But in the meantime, you've got programs coming out tomorrow with the next in the series of a logical deconstruction of Mormonism. You've got Radio Free Mormon and Mormonism After Dark on Friday. And RFM almost always puts out an episode on Saturdays as well. And then we'll see you back around the corner of the weekend for the newscast. But all of you have a great night. And thank you for tuning in tonight. Kudos to both of you. And we'll see all of you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.